Hello everyone, good evening. This is Kiran, the trainer joining.
Hi, Kiran. Hello.
Okay, let me share my screen. Yeah, can one of you please confirm if my screen share is visible?
Yeah, I see.
Okay. Okay, so quick recap. The last class we did discuss about the client and server architecture. Guys, be on mute. You're disturbing us. Raj, can you go on mute? Okay. So we discussed about client and server architecture. Excuse me. We just started about discussing the client and server architecture in the last class, where client sent a request and we received a response. I have given some examples of requests such as google.com and the /JSON/XML examples. And we have also received responses in HTML format, XML format, JSON format. Apart from that, we have also seen that the client sends a protocol to this server, and the protocol can be either HTTP or HTTPS. And we discussed various protocols that are available on the internet. But I said we will talk specific to HTTP protocol and HTTPS protocol today. So I'm sure you're all aware of it, but I will do a quick recap as well. So HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And we use HTTP protocol to transfer the data between client and server. So I can say it is used to transfer data between client and server. Okay. And when HTTP is designed by the internet, it was almost designed in the years 1990s or so. So it is considered as a unsecured protocol. So it is an unsecured protocol by design. So why is it called unsecured? The reason is whatever data client and server are exchanging with each other, it is traveling in a plain text format, meaning the data sent is in plain text format. Hence, anyone can steal your data on the internet, or they can tamper your data, they can modify the data, they can delete the data, they can change the data, or they don't even have to disturb the data if they don't want to disturb. So it is an unsecured protocol by design because data transfer happens in plain text format. So that is one of the drawbacks we had in HTTP protocol. But as the internet evolved and then people started using emails, chatting, social media slowly, online payments, there was a necessity for the World Wide Web to come up with a secured concept of transferring data. That's when they have introduced HTTPS. So HTTPS is the advanced format of HTTP, where HTTPS stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol with the security. So the additional thing is it has got the security layer, and it is considered as a secured protocol because the data transfers happens in encrypted format. The data will not go from client to server or server to client in plain text format. It goes in encrypted format in HTTPS. Hence, it is considered as a secured protocol. And this encryption is achieved in HTTPS. Encryption is achieved using SSL or TLS protocol. So these are the two protocols available. using which HTTP became HTTPS, which means HTTP protocol plus SSL encryption has given the rise to HTTPS, or HTTP plus TLS has become HTTPS. This is the latest standard today, and using SSL is actually outdated now. Initially, they used SSL to convert HTTP to HTTPS. Now the industry is using TLS to convert HTTP to HTTPS. And another thing that you have to know is within TLS, we have version 1.0, then TLS version 1.1, TLS version 1.2, TLS version 1.3. These are the three versions available within TLS as well. And you have to know that TLS 1.0 is outdated, 1.1 is outdated, 1.2 is outdated, and finally the latest is 1.3 TLS. So here you have to remember one test case. When you are talking to your developers about APIs, ensure that they are using TLS version, that to 1.3, because that is the latest one. Your developer should not use SSL, which is outdated. Your developer should not use HTTP, which is also outdated. So I'll quickly write few test cases here that comes to our mind now. Test cases related to protocol for your API testing. And this is very basic testing. Verify APIs are developed to work with HTTPS and not HTTP. Then verify APIs are configured to work with TLS and not SSL. Then verify APIs are configured to use TLS version 1.3 and not TLS version 1.1 or version 1.2 or 1.0. So these are the three test cases that we have to keep in mind with regards to protocol level. Okay. So in the diagram, if you see, we know HTTP is unsecured, HTTPS is secured. And here we should always tell the developer use TLS version 1.3 because that is the latest version of protocol. And how will you come to know whether my developer is using SSL or TLS or HTTP or HTTPS? Very simple. On your Chrome browser or any other browser, you can easily find it. Let's open our Chrome browser or Firefox browser. Go to any website of your choice. Let us say I would like to go to Isha Training Solutions website. I would like to know whether this is using HTTP or HTTPS. Here you can see they are using HTTPS, very clear. Now this HTTPS, is it because of SSL or TLS, and which version they are using? To know that, right click on your browser, click on inspect. This will open Chrome Developer Tools. And here you have one option called privacy and security. Go there. Under security tab, you see, we have overview. Here we will get the details whether this website is using TLS or SSL, but it says reload to view the details. So just refresh your browser. And here you see under security, we have main origin and the website name. Click on the website name and you can see the protocol Isha Training Solutions.org is using is TLS and not SSL. And that too they're using latest 1.3, not 1.2 or 1.0 or 1.1. Similarly, if you want any other website, be on this privacy and security tab and just visit the website. Example, I wanted to visit this one, http://bin.org/json. Any website, okay? I'm typing something that I'm aware of. And here you can come and check. See, this website is using TLS, which is good because it is not using SSL. But within TLS, they are using 1.2, but 1.2 is outdated. So our test case is failing here. So in your APIs, your developer should use TLS version 1.3, not 1.0, 1.1, 1.2. Okay, this is about protocol. I hope it's clear for all of you. Pretty much simple, right? We have not used any installations, nothing. It's a regular browser behavior. Continuing our client and server architecture, the client sends an API request. Every API request is associated with a protocol. I would also like to tell that every API request that goes to server is also associated with something called HTTP methods. also called as HTTP verbs. Okay. Now HTTP methods or HTTP verbs. Okay. I'm sure you are aware of it. HTTP methods like a get method, post method, put, patch, delete. That is what I'm talking about here when I say HTTP methods. So let me write here HTTP methods or HTTP verbs. To define what is a HTTP method, the answer is simple. We know that the client is sending this request, right? So this request will be going from client to server like this. So server will ask you what type of request you are sending to me. Can you explain? So to tell what type of request we are sending to server, we use HTTP methods. Okay, so what is the definition of HTTP methods? It describes the type of client request being sent to server. That is the definition. And the examples for HTTP methods are the normal get method, post method, put, patch, delete. These are the top 5 methods that we need to learn. Let me explain you what is all these methods. So we use get method as an API developer or as an API tester when the requirement is to get the data from the server. When your request is to fetch the existing data, we use get method. So I'll say this HTTP method is used by client when it wants to fetch or retrieve or read existing data from the database or from the server. All the HTTP methods are sent by client only to the server. Server will not send the HTTP method. Note it. In the diagram also you can see HTTP methods is here, which means client is sending to server. So when the client says, okay, server, you have some data in the database, I need that data. In that case, the request should have get method in your API testing. So examples of get method include viewing your pay slips. Okay, now this is almost 7th of April and most of you might have received your salaries. Your finance team might have generated a pay slip. So you see your pay slip, right? So when you view it, it is an example of a get method because the pay slip is already generated. It's there in the database. You are viewing it. Okay. Similarly, browsing web content or browsing web pages. Example, if I'm just browsing what is there on this website, I'm visiting the website URL. So it's a get request. Or if I'm going to Isha Training Solutions.org to know what courses they are upcoming, what courses they are teaching now. This is also the browsing a website is nothing but get request. And you do a lot of online purchases, e-commerce. And we view our existing orders to know what is the dispatch status. So they're all examples of get method. Okay. And file downloads. If you're downloading any file from the internet, maybe a picture or an image or a text or a file, they're all considered as get method because you're downloading something that's already there on the database. Next, we have post method. So the definition goes like this. This HTTP method is used by client when it wants to create a new resource, nothing but data on the database or on the server. So client is telling the server that I don't want any existing data, but I want to create a new data in your database. Meaning it's like inserting data into the database. That's when we use the HTTP method as post. Your developer uses post method when the action you are doing on the application you are testing is to create a data. So when do you create a data? Example, file upload. So when I'm uploading a file to Google Drive, or when I'm uploading my picture to WhatsApp display picture, or when I'm uploading photos to my Google Photos, it's a post method because you are uploading data from current local computer to server. So server is getting new file uploaded, so it's a post call. Or when you make an online purchase, so when you're creating an order in e-commerce, applications. Maybe you have ordered food for dinner. So ordering a food item is also post method because you are creating an order in the database. Okay. Otherwise, your finance team generating pay slips in the finance portal. So there are also examples of that. Or when I'm sending an email or a WhatsApp message, or when you post a feed in social media, whether it is Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or any other social media. So sending an email, they're all examples where you are creating data in the database. That's when post method is used. Another classic example is user sign up to any website. So when you sign up to Facebook, Instagram, GitHub, Gmail, they're all examples of post method. I'll take a quick question from anyone if you have. Have you all understood what is get method and post method and what is the protocol also? Can I have a confirmation if it's clear? If you have question, you can ask.
Can you give me example with Postman, get post?
Example with?
Postman tool, get post method.
These are all the examples, right? It is irrespective of Postman tool. These examples are common, whether it is Postman tool or Rest Assured tool or Selenium or anything. When we talk about real APIs, then I will talk about Postman.
No, this is a theoretical knowledge, but how to use get post with Postman?
So you'll have to wait for the upcoming classes, I mean, because we are going in a sequential order, right? Our intention is to build the basics and the fundamentals. Directly, if I show Postman, it's like jumping the gun, and others might have difficulty understanding the flow. So we will definitely see how to use a get API or a post API in Postman. In our first project, we are definitely seeing it.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we'll talk about put method. So we use put and patch methods to update data in the database. So the definition is simple. This HTTP method is used by client to update or to modify or to replace existing data with new data in the database or on the server. So whenever you want to update the data, that's when we use put method or even patch method. Example will be updating profile in social media or updating profile pictures in your WhatsApp application, or editing a message sent on email or sent on WhatsApp or sent on Microsoft Teams, anything for that matter. They're all examples of put method. Classic example I can take is changing your password. You know your password, but you like to change your password. Remember, it's not forgot password, it's change password. You wanted to change your password because it has been very old password. So when you change your password in Gmail, Outlook, Facebook, Instagram, that's when put method is called. And sometimes you make an order for size L, but later you edit the order saying, okay, I don't want L, I want extra large t-shirt. So you're changing the size of the t-shirt after the order is created. So that's when put method will be called. And patch method is also same as put method, but there is a small difference. So this is also used to update this, but limited to partial or selective updates. Meaning, if you want to update all the fields in the database, then you have to go for put method. If you want to update not all the fields, but few fields, like 1 or 2 fields, or maybe 3 fields out of 10 fields, then we use patch method. Example, in your Facebook, when you click on edit profile, you get a screen where you have 10 fields to update. Like you can update first name, last name, gender, whether you are single or married, that section, then your current city, your address, interested in, etc., etc. So many fields are there. Not all the fields are mandatory to update. So I'll probably update only the current city where I'm living in. So I will change current city, Hyderabad, click on save. I'm updating only one field. So that's called as a partial update or a selective field update. Later, someone wanted to say, hey, I got engaged. So he changes the marital status from single to engaged. So that's a partial update. So when you do simple updates, not for all the fields, for less than all the fields, that's when we use the method patch as a development. Finally, delete method, self-explanatory. It is used for deleting anything. So this HTTP method is used by client to delete existing data in the database or on the server. An example could be deleting your emails or WhatsApp messages or whatever order I made on the online website. Later, I took my second thought, and then I thought, let me delete my order. I mean, canceling the order. So cancel the order that's already done, and deactivating social media accounts, etc. They're all part of your delete method. So when we are testing APIs, we will see these HTTP methods coming into picture. So here in the client and server architecture, you have to understand that we are going to deal with get method, post method, put methods, patch methods, and delete methods. There are a lot of examples on the internet where you can see these HTTP methods available. I'll just show quickly. There are hundreds of websites. I just wanted to show something which is pretty common on the internet. So here you see there is one API that is using get method. There is one API, the name create, which is using post method. There is an API called update, which is using put method. Another API that is using patch method. Another API that is using delete method. And few more APIs here, if you see, they're using post methods. And the API request is shown here, and the response is also coming here. So we'll talk about these nuances later, because one of you asked for a question. I thought at least at a rough level, I can show that to you. I'm not going deeper into that section now, because it's like jumping the topic, which I would not like to do. So we have discussed client is sending an API request followed by a protocol, followed by a HTTP method. And then we have something called request headers. So this is something that your client sends to server called request headers. So request headers typically mean that additional data which your client is sending to server. Additional data could be a metadata that server wanted to know. Example will be, I give this classic example most of the times. When I go to the bank and meet the bank manager and ask the bank manager, hey, I have a request. And the request is, I need a home loan for 2 crores Indian rupees. That is the request. Bank manager immediately will not approve it. He will definitely ask me, okay, Kiran, please sit down. Let's talk about more details. So I will give him more details, like for which company I work, what is my salary, what are my savings, do I have any existing loans, am I eligible for 2 crores home loan, can I repay it, what is my repayment history, what is my CBIL score. I have to provide all these additional details to the bank manager in order to get my loan approved or get my loan rejected. So that additional information that I'm giving to bank manager, like where I work, what is my current bank balance, what is my savings, etc., they're all called as request headers. Now, when we talk about client and server architecture, especially in the API testing industry, there are a lot of request headers we are going to talk about. Example, we are talking about a header called connection, a header called user agent, then a header called accept, another header called accept language, another header called content type, another header called authorization, etc. Like this, there are so many headers. Okay? Finally, let me tell you what is request headers. It is the additional metadata sent by client to the server along with client request. Okay, these are the headers which are bare minimum for us to know while we are doing API testing. So connection header can have 2 values. One is keep alive. If the connection header value is keep alive, it means in the diagram, client and server are already connected with each other. If the value of connection is close, it means in the diagram, client and server are not connected with each other, meaning this client is disconnected with server, so no request can be sent. Then you have user agent. User agent will have the values related to what operating system the client is using and what is the browser details browser details and version details. Browser version details, I can say browser name and version details. So user agent will tell whether the request is coming from Windows operating system or Linux operating system or Mac operating system. It will also tell whether the browser the client is using is a Chrome browser or a Firefox browser or an Opera browser or a Safari browser. Then what is the version of that browser? That is also told in the user agent by the client. Then we have accept. Accept header reveals in which format server response to client will be accepted. So the format in which server response will be accepted by client. Examples of formats will be like JSON format, XML format, HTML format, text format, YAML format, etc. Because server can give the response in any format. Here you see in the last class we have seen the response came in HTML format, XML and JSON. So which format is okay for the client? Client can tell that in accept header. So client can give a notice to the server that I will accept only JSON. Then accept value will be JSON. Then server is told that please give a JSON response. Then we have accept language. Languages in which international language the response should come. Should it come in English or Hindi or Japanese or French or Spanish or Chinese or Portuguese? So in which language the response on the website should be displayed or the API response should come. So this talks about language like English, United States, English, Great Britain, English, India, like this. It can talk about in which languages the API response should come from server to client. All these are configured by your developer. And we need to know all these things because when you are testing APIs, these things becomes pretty much easy during the testing process when you see them. Directly, if I go to testing, all these things will be confusions. So we are building the basics on what happens in the internet. When you type gmail.com and leave it, all these things happen in the internet. Then you have content to type. Content to type means in the diagram, you see client is sending a request, right? In which format the request is sent by client. That is told by content to type. Okay. So I will say the format in which client request is sent to server. And it can go in any of these formats, like I have told. Then we have authorization. This is where the user credentials are supplied. When the client is sending a request, okay, sometimes the request needs a username and password. Otherwise, server says, I will give an error 401 unauthorized. So to avoid those authorization errors, the client has to supply the user credentials. That user credentials will be sent in a request header called authorization. So these are few of the request headers that we have, not the only set of request headers. Okay, so let me write them here. So we have something called connection, user agent, accept language, content type, authorization. Okay, these are few of the request headers that client sends to server. I'll take a small pause here. Do you have any questions here? Is there any confusion you are having or you have any questions? Feel free to ask me now.
So what will be the what will be the parameters if the request is going from a mobile application?
Okay, good question. So then the value of user agent will be something like Android. If you're using Android phone, if you're sending it from iPhone, it will look like iPhone. I'll show you one website where you will get an answer to your question. So if you go to this website, I can show you one answer. Forget about where I'm going. This you will see it later when I'm teaching you clearly. In practicals, I will talk about this website, how I'm going to use it. So if you're sending from Android phone or iOS phone, the value of user agent will look like this. So the user agent will say, I'm coming from iPhone and the operating system of iPhone is 17_7 and the request is coming from a Safari browser whose version is 604. So if you are sending gmail.com on your iPhone browser, iPhone Safari browser, this value will go from your smartphone to the server, to the Gmail server in the user agent. If you are testing it on Android phone, this is the value that will go, where you see Android and the browser you are using and the version of the browser. So this is the syntax of a user agent, how it looks like.
Okay.
Okay, I'll give this. Again, at a high level only, I'm answering your questions to some extent. Practically, you will get better answers once we switch to Postman tool and actual API testing. Okay, any other questions from others?
Actually, sir, what is the main difference between a patch and put method? Because
Okay,
both are.
Okay, understood. I'll explain them. First difference is you can use patch to update all the fields in the database. Whereas, sorry, did I say something incorrect? Yeah. So if I say put, you can use it to update all the fields. Or you can also use put method to update partial fields. Whereas if I talk about patch method, you can update only partial fields. That is the first difference. Second difference from a developer's perspective, put can also create a record in the database, meaning it works like post method as well. Put can be used to replace post method, whereas patch cannot create a record, meaning it cannot work like post method. That's another difference. And patch method is a speedy operation because it is updating only partial fields. And put method, if it is updating all the fields, it cannot be fast like patch. So I will say it is a slow operation only as compared to patch. Okay, these are the three differences between put and patch methods. Is that clear, Rahul?
Okay. Record means create record.
Any data. Record means creating a user in the database is a record. Making a food online order is also a record. When one row is created in the database, we call it as a record.
Okay.
Okay, now we have completed 50% of client and server architecture. Let's talk about the reverse journey, meaning from server to client, what happens. So server also works and sends response headers. So these response headers will be acknowledgement to the request headers. So you have some response headers like content type, meaning in which format server is giving the response to client. So is the server giving in JSON format or HTML format or XML format or text format or YAML format? That will be told in the content type. Then you have accept language, whether server is giving the response in English or Hindi or Japanese or French or Spanish, that language will be displayed here. Then server means which server is giving answer to this client. Is it a Tomcat server or Apache server or Microsoft IIS server? So which application server or web server is giving a response to the client request? That you will see under server. Then you have date field. It talks about the date on which the response is coming from server to client. Usually it will be the date on which you have sent a request, because if you send a request now, you get the response immediately. So it will be that particular day's request only. Okay. Then yeah, I think these are few of the response headers that server will send to the client. Just like client is sending request headers, server will send response headers. I'm talking about only 4 headers now. There are so many other headers. We will see them as we test APIs, and we'll discuss about them as we test APIs. Then the server sends us something called a response code, and every response code has something called a response description. Now, what is a response code? Maybe I should write it here to make it clear. So response code. The definition is it is a 3-digit status code sent by server to the client. Why is it sending it? To reveal the status of client request. So client had sent a request, and that request could have passed, could have failed, could have errored out, could have been ignored by server, or is still waiting at the server side. So client is waiting to know what happened to my request. So server will send a response code to educate the client what happened to the request. So the response codes range in the internet starts from 100 and it goes all the way until 599. Meaning there are 600 response codes on the internet when you are testing your web applications or APIs. Since we cannot remember all the 600 response codes, we can break them into 5 classes. So any response code that falls between 100 to 199, we call it as 1xx. Any response that falls under 200 to 299, we call it as 2xx. Then 300 through 399, we call it as 3xx series. 400 to 499 is called as 4xx series. 500 to 599 is called as 5xx series. So this 1xx series response codes, we call them as informational responses. So anything that falls under 200 to 299 or 2xx, we call it as successful responses. Anything that falls under 3xx, we call them as redirectional responses. Any response code that comes under 400 to 499, we call it as client-side errors. And finally, 500 to 599, we call it as server-side errors. Since we cannot remember all the 500 or 600 response codes, we have to definitely remember these 5 series, because this is important for API testers, and this is an interview question as well. Okay. So let me tell you what is informational responses. So informational responses means when your request is sent to server and the request is still in the pipeline, meaning server has not yet executed it. Your request is still waiting. It is in the queue process. Then it belongs to 1xx category, meaning the response code of that particular situation is called informational responses. Then if the response code is coming from 200 to 299, we call it as a successful responses, meaning whatever request you have sent it to server, server accepted the request, executed the request, and it has also given you a response. This is what we expect in API testing. All our test cases to get successful responses. Then we have 300 to 399 redirectional responses, meaning the request went to some server, but this server is busy. So this server said, go to this server, or go to this server, or go to this server. So what happens? Your request will be redirected from this server to this server, then this server to this server, or this server to this server, or this to this, or this to this, like this. So these are called as redirections. Example, one of you calls me on the phone and says, hey Kiran, do you teach Python programming language? I will say, no, there is a person called Rahul Jain. Go and talk to him. He will train you. So I'm redirecting you to some other trainer. That's like redirectional responses. Then we have client-side errors, meaning whatever request client had sent, there is a problem in the request. There could be a syntax mistake. There could be data unavailability mistake. Like you are trying to log in without a password. So you get an error, right? Please enter password. That's a client-side error because you are making the mistake by not typing the password. So when the client who is sending the request is making mistakes, server will throw this error to you, 4xx, telling you that, hey, you made the mistake. Ideally, in API testing, we should not encounter client-side errors. It is treated as a bug. Then we have 500 series, 500 to 599, which we call them as server-side errors. These errors are coming because the server is busy right now and it cannot accept your request. Hence, the server rejects your request. Ideally, we should never get server-side errors also. So let me copy this, put it in the diagram. So the numbers are called as response codes, and the server-side error message, whatever you see, or client-side errors, successful errors, redirection errors, they are all called as response descriptions. Okay. Let me take a pause here. Are there any questions to me until this point?
Yeah, I have a question. So 100 is a response which is waiting for the get the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
once it completes, then it gives a 200 response.
Yes, that's right. Until the client gets a response, it will be either in some 1xx category or 3xx category. If it is finally answered, it becomes 2xx. If you
So
have
when
made a
I get
mistake, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, when I get 100 response, which means that the connection is still active, right?
Yes, it is still active and you are like waiting in the queue.
Okay.
So to put your question in the form of a workflow, it looks like this. Let's say you sent some request to the server. So initially its status will be 1xx. After sometimes it will become 2xx. That is one way how the request successfully gets a response. Another scenario is like initially it is waiting, then it went to server. Server said, I'm busy, I'm sending you to another server. That another server gave a response. So it becomes success 2xx. Or it becomes 1xx initially. It went to server and server has seen a problem in the request, meaning your request is incomplete. It ends at 4xx only. Another scenario is it is 1xx. Maybe it is getting redirected and the next server is telling your request has a problem. So it ends at 4xx. Then 1xx for a new request. It went to server. Server said your request is valid, but I am busy. I cannot accept your request. So it is rejected and becomes 5xx. Or it can become from 1xx to 3xx and later 5xx. Ideally speaking, this is the flow that we expect in API testing. Ending up in 4xx is a bug for us because you made a mistake. Ending up in 5xx is also a bug because server is not accepting it. Server job is to accept the request in spite of the difficulties, in spite of the busy schedule. So this is an accepted scenario. And the below are not accepted scenarios. We don't encourage these things to happen at all. Meaning if it happens, of course, it's a bug. We have to report it to the developer. Did I answer your question, Ramesh? Now you must be having a little clarity, I guess.
Yes, I got it.
Okay. So this is about the client and server architecture, guys. We spent almost 2 classes or 1.5 class to understand client and server. This is what happens in the internet when you do performance testing or API testing or security testing or manual testing or automation testing. But no one goes into the depth the way we have done. And the reason is we need to know all this stuff before you learn API automation testing practically. The reason is directly if we go to Postman tool and then I say, okay, the TLS version is incorrect, we are using put method, there is always some, low hanging fruits which will never be clear to us. Now, I would like to show you some common response codes that we have to know from an interview perspective or from a testing perspective. So I'm going to talk about 2xx common response codes, meaning we deal with them almost every day if you are an API tester. So there is a code called 200, which means okay. There is a code called 201, which means created. 202, which means accepted. 204, which means no content, etc. But these four are important. 200 okay means whatever request you have sent to server, server has accepted the request and gave you a response, which means maybe you're asking the server to get you some existing data, or you told the server create a user called Kiran in the database, it created successfully, or you told the server update a user called Kiran to Kiran trainer as his name, it updated it successfully, or you sent a request saying, delete a user called Kiran in the database, it deleted it successfully. So when your get actions are successfully completed, create actions are successfully completed, update actions are successfully completed, or delete actions are successfully completed, these are the scenarios where your developer mostly will give you this response code in your API when you are testing it. So 200 OK works for all the 4 HTTP methods: get, post, put, patch, delete. 201 created is used mostly when you create a record and it is successfully happening it, and you're using post method for that. So when I tell the server, I have an API, using this API, allow me to send an email. And if the email is sent successfully, the response from server will be 201 created, meaning your email content is successfully created and sent to the other person. Or I will say, hey server, I have an API, allow me to create a user in the database called Kiran for Facebook. And server said, okay, Kiran user has been created in the database. That's when the server gives me 201 created response code. These are the standard response codes used by your developer, and we should know in what circumstances they use them. 202 accepted will come when updating a record is successfully completed, when you use put or patch methods. So if I have told the server that I have an API and please update the password from ABCD to 1234. If the password is successfully updated, then the server might give you 202 accepted. Then you have 204 no content. When you tell the server, hey, delete this guy called Kiran in the database using delete method. If the record is deleted successfully in the database, meaning that entry in the database is successfully deleted, then the server gives to the response code as 204 no content. Developer can give 201 created or 200 OK when the record is created successfully. He can give you 202 accepted or 200 OK when update is successfully done. He may throw 204 no content or 200 OK when the record deletion is successfully done. But these are the 4 options the developer will have, and it is his choice which one to use because he is developing the code. Similarly, in 4xx series, some common response codes that we can think of is 400, which means bad request, 401, which means unauthorized, 403, which means forbidden, 404 meaning not found. So bad request will come when whatever data you have sent to server is incomplete. Example, you are doing a user registration. You have to fill all the 10 fields. You forgot to fill one of the field or maybe 2 fields and clicked on submit. Then you get this error, 400 bad request. Technically speaking, this error comes from server to backend. In front end, you will see an error like please fill all the mandatory fields. But behind that regular message, please fill all the mandatory fields, this error code is there, 400 bad request. Then you have 401 unauthorized. We get 401 unauthorized when the credentials you have used to log into the application is invalid or expired or does not exist now, like that. Sometimes we forget our usernames, passwords. We type some mistakes in the username, password, and you get a message like invalid credentials or please enter username, please enter password. Behind that message, this error code is generated by server in the backend, 401 unauthorized. Then we have 403 forbidden. This will come after you have logged in successfully And why this error is coming? Because you are trying to do some action for which you don't have the permission. Suddenly one of you says, Kiran, can I be a trainer for the next 10 minutes? While I welcome the idea, you cannot become a trainer. So it is forbidden for you because you don't have access rights to become a trainer. Similarly, I cannot approve my own leave. That's forbidden to me. Someone else only can approve it. So when you try to do anything on the internet, but you don't have the admin privileges or you don't have the access rights permissions, in the backend, this error is generated. 403 forbidden. Finally, 404 not found. Whatever request you have sent to server said that, I'm sorry, I cannot find that request on the server. Then you will get this error, 404 not found. I can show one example. If I type google.com, it's working because that's a perfect URL. But if I change it to google.com/kiran.html, you see I got an error 404. And it says the requested URL kiran.html is not found on the server. That's all we know. So when you are when you're asking servers for some request and that request does not have a place in the database, you get that error. Rahul, do you have any question?
Yes, I have some query. Actually, regarding request, in which language does the send the request client side?
Sorry, I did not understand. Say that again, please. What is your question?
Suppose if the client send the request in HTML format, so will the response be in HTML? Like
Mostly in HTML only, but we cannot guarantee anything unless the content type from server is checked. So content type response header will give an answer to your question.
So it depends on client side or server side, like request format, like HTML, JSON format.
No, see, two questions here. When you send a request, the client controls in which format he is sending the request. When you're getting a response from server controls in which format the response should come from server to client. So in which format you are sending, you have to check in content type on the client side. In which format server is sending, you have to check a content type on the server side in the response header.
Okay, means client send request in JSON format. So it not sure server send request in JSON format or HTML format. It is not sure. No?
Yes, it is not sure. Yes, it depends on the server. Usually we assume that if you send a JSON request, you will get JSON response. If you send HTML, you will get HTML response. If you send a YAML, you will get YAML response. While it is 90% correct assumption, it can also fail in 10% of the chances. Because sometimes you send a JSON request, you might get a HTML response also. Example, you're asking me a question in English, but I can answer you in Hindi also suddenly.
Okay.
But your language is English, I'm answering in Hindi. No one expected that. Right? So suddenly my language can change from English to Hindi. Suddenly your language can change from English to Hindi. So if you're asking in English, there is no rule that I have to give an answer to in English. But professionally, I have to give in English only. But once we get into 10th class, 12th class, meaning the 10th day of our training program, I might give an answer in Hindi also to you so that you feel comfortable. Suddenly you will start saying, Kiran, can I ask the question in Hindi because I feel comfortable? I'm like, okay, but I'll give an answer in English so others can also understand. So you are sending the request in Hindi, my answer is in English. So content type is also different here. So depending on the situation, the response content type can change. It is controlled by the server. Any other questions? Manoj, Manjot, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. My question is regarding the put and the patch. So basically, you did mention that both can be used to update the partial records. So my confusion is, so if everything can be done by put, like, is there any specific scenarios where we prefer using patch instead of put? Because both can be used to update the partial records, right? So why do we
Yes.
need patch in that case?
Okay, so again, it's a binary thing. So developer can decide whether for the project they need put or patch. They won't use both of them for sure. They can pick any one in their project. Mostly put is recommended because put is replacing patch permanently.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. Like, is there any kind of a scenario like where a tester should think that, okay, the patch should be preferred instead of put, or like, is that something we should not worry about?
Certainly we should not worry about, because developer and the architect decides which HTTP methods are valid for the project.
Okay.
And as a QA engineer, as an automation API engineer, our focus is to understand what methods did my developer use, and we use the same methods for testing purpose.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, thank you.
Meaning if developer said we are using put, you have to use put in your testing, not patch.
Okay.
Okay, finally, 5xx series, guys. I think we have common response codes. There are only 2 response codes under 5xx that we should know. We have 500, which means internal server error, and 503, which means service unavailable. Ideally, we should not get these kind of errors while testing APIs. So if you are getting internal server error while testing an API, it means the API server is temporarily not working, but you can retry after a minute or so. Because of the load on the server is unable to handle the request. But if the error code is 503 service unavailable, it means the entire API server is down. It is down until someone comes and restarts it, which is a pretty bad situation. So few test cases here. Our API's response code should always be 2xx. Only then our test case will pass. If the API's response code you are getting from the server is 4xx or a 5xx, it's a failure scenario, meaning you have to report them as bugs to developer. We will see them again practically, don't worry. Right now I'm telling you that whatever we are discussing has a relationship with the test cases that we are going to build tomorrow, meaning in upcoming classes. Okay, so that's about client and server architecture, guys. I hope you understood it. Any questions before we conclude the call for today? We have 1 more minute before we conclude. Okay, looks like everything is clean and simple. I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll talk about the front end, back end, and server database architecture. So you'll understand where APIs are coming into picture, how front end is communicating with back end, and how back end is communicating with database and the reverse journey. With that, we'll complete chapter 1 tomorrow. Okay, thank you for your time today.
The notes? Sorry, can you share the notes so far we completed?
Yes, once I get the final list of participants, I'll be sharing the notes with all of you. Otherwise, you guys can just put your email address on the chat window. I'll ask my backend team to shoot an email on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then. Thank you very much, everyone. And if you are liking the sessions, please complete your enrollments by speaking to Isha team in the backend. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kiran.
Thank you.